Thank you all for being here to welcome the Secretary General. We just had a please be seated, please be seated. The General Secretary just had a very productive meeting. We had a very productive meeting in the White House with the President. Ambassador Vinh and the entire Vietnamese delegation, thank you for joining us as well. And I also want to welcome, who was part of the meeting, U.S. Trade Representative Mike Froman, who is here, Fred Hochberg, Chairman of Export-Import Bank, who I think is here, as well as Representative Matsui of Hawaii, who is California. Well, I'm sorry. You know, I'm going to blame that one on my speechwriter. I knew it was California. And our ambassador to Vietnam as well. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us to celebrate the 20th anniversary of the establishment of diplomatic relations between our two nations. This is a particularly unique privilege for me since I got elected as a former national security advisor, one of the best we've ever had knows. I got elected in 1972 as a 29-year-old young man. My main reason for running was to end the war in Vietnam. Here I am as Vice President with the General Secretary celebrating 20-year anniversary of the establishment of diplomatic relations with nothing but promise on the horizon. I was on the Foreign Relations Committee when we achieved that historic breakthrough together. It took a lot of courage, it took vision, and it took a lot of hard work to get there. But together, we confronted the painful legacy of the past and laid the foundation for a successful partnership that has followed. We're working together now to account for missing personnel, to bring closure to so many families who are seeking it desperately. We're partnering to remove much of the explosive ordnance left over from the war. The United States has dedicated over $80 million to that effort thus far. We're remediating toxic remains of war, including 45,000 cubic meters of dioxin-contaminated soil removed so far from the Da Nang Air Base. Most importantly, we're continuing to reach out and establish personal relationships that are so critical to the foundation of trust. As a matter of fact, the General Secretary spoke of that today in the Oval Office, the very important need to establish personal relationships. And some have heard me say this before. One of my mentors years ago, I say that Dr. Vallely was a fellow Massachusetts, fellow Bostonian, Tip O'Neill. He used to say all politics was local. Well, I've gotten old enough to think I can presume to improve on what he said, because quite frankly, I think all politics is personal, particularly the conduct of foreign policy. Unless you can establish a personal relationship, it's hard to establish trust. And that's what all agreements are ultimately based upon. And so that's why we're so grateful for your presence here today, Mr. General Secretary. It's an honor to have you here because as remarkable as the past 2 decades have been, I believe, and more importantly, the President believes, that our relationship is just getting started. Our conversations today in the Oval Office are no longer about how to address the past, but about how to seize the future. That's why President Obama and President Tsang launched the Comprehensive Partnership 2 years ago. It's a partnership that recognizes that while we have different systems, there is so much we can nonetheless do together. And it's a partnership that welcomes the participation of many voices, including Vietnamese Americans, many of whom are here today. And we will continue to have challenging conversations while respecting each other's viewpoints and system, but that's how we've gotten to where we are today. And that's how we'll continue to build this relationship for tomorrow. We'll continue to find ways to expand our economic relationship and become stronger partners on key global issues related to the environment, science, technology, and to health. And we look forward to a future with a strong, independent, prosperous Vietnam that respects human rights and the rule of law. Over the next 20 years, our strong cooperation on climate change, sustainable development, clean energy in the Mekong region, all these will exemplify the promise of our deepening partnership. And we'll continue to build our bilateral relationship, including in defense, maritime security, civil nuclear programs, and humanitarian assistance and disaster relief. They're all part of this burgeoning relationship. And as we continue our nation's, the U.S. rebalance strategy to the Asia-Pacific region, partners like Vietnam have never been more consequential than they are today. We have shared interest in peace and stability of the region, shared interest in a prosperous ASEAN, and strengthening relationships between our two countries. But I think the most important step our two countries can take this year is to build our economic progress and deepen our economic relations, to include the Trans-Pacific Partnership, and work to ensure its full implementation. There's more work to do, but after 5 years of negotiations, we're hopeful that we'll be able to achieve this goal in the coming weeks. This agreement will open up markets, promote innovation, economic growth and development, and support jobs both in Vietnam and the United States. It will stitch together the economies of 12 Pacific nations behind rising standards regarding labor, rising standards on the environment, and rising standards on what constitutes fair competition. So I want to thank you for your efforts so far in this important agreement, Mr. General, and urge that we make further progress so we can make sure we cross the finish line. There's much more to do in a short amount of time. This relationship is both broad and it's also diverse. And I want to heighten a few other areas where we're working together, including some agreements we've signed during the General Secretary's visit. First, a Memorandum of Understanding, or MOU, to help with the prevention, the early detection and response to dangerous pathogens. Another MOU to allow the exchange visits of defense and military delegations on peacekeeping operations. Thirdly, a double taxation avoidance agreement, which will bring greater fairness to our international taxation system, and a grant to help enhance aviation safety. Several other commercial deals will be signed at an event tomorrow hosted by the U.S. ASEAN Business Council and the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. But let's not overlook one of the most exciting commercial developments just yesterday. Boeing and Vietnam Airlines marked a new milestone in their partnership by commemorating Boeing's first 789-D Dreamliner delivery, and they announced their intention to explore further sales, committing the parties to work toward the sale of an estimated $7 billion in aircraft. And I understand an additional agreement between Boeing and Vietjet is underway, with a memorandum to be signed tomorrow, which, once fully negotiated, could be worth another $6 billion. And earlier this year, we signed an MOU in Hanoi that will help Vietnam create a competitive electric market by promoting private sector investment in energy infrastructure. I'm also pleased, but not as pleased as my friend Dr. Vallely is, I'm also pleased that the government of Vietnam will grant a license to allow a new Fulbright University Vietnam to begin the construction and investment process at a 15-hectare site in the Saigon Hanoi Tech Park, High-Tech Park. If you excuse, we used to say a point of personal privilege. I've had to listen to Dr. Vallely on this for the last 15 years. We've been friends for 40, but for the last 15 years. So, Tommy, I hope it ends the phone calls on this. At any rate, as someone once said, it's a big deal. It's these people-to-people exchanges, including 17,000 Vietnamese students, as the General Secretary mentioned today in the Oval Office, currently studying our universities and colleges, that give me the greatest optimism for the future of our relationship. The young people of our nations are unburdened by the past, as some of my generation, and they're relentlessly driven by the future. So I'd like to raise a glass Here we go. I'd like to raise a glass to the limitless future of our relationship. And the great Vietnamese poet Nguyen Du had written, "Thank heaven we're here today to see the sun through the parting fog and clouds," because it is parting. We're here. Mr. General Secretary. Thank you.
Vice President Joe Biden, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the Vietnamese delegation, I would like to express sincere gratitude to the U.S. government for the warm welcome and hospitality extended to me and the Vietnamese high-level delegation during my official visit to the United States on the occasion of the 20th anniversary of diplomatic relations and the second anniversary of the comprehensive partnership between our two countries. My special thanks go to Vice President Joe Biden for hosting this luncheon today and for giving me and my delegation the opportunity to meet you all here today, those who have worked tirelessly to contribute to the development of our bilateral relations over the past years. Ladies and gentlemen, first of all, allow me on behalf of all Vietnamese leaders and people to extend to the leaders and people of the United States the warmest congratulations on the 239th Independence Day of the United States. And a few minutes ago, I had very substantive and useful talks with President Barack Obama. We exchanged views and agreed with each other on the major directions to deepen and broaden the comprehensive partnership, build trust, and lay the foundation for continue bringing Vietnam-U.S. relations to new heights. Now, I want to spend some short time of this gathering to share with you some of my thoughts about the relationship between our two countries. First, 20 years is indeed a short time to build the Vietnam-U.S. relationship, the one which was characterized by numerous difficulties and complexities, given the major differences between our two countries and the war the United States conducted in Vietnam. Yet what surprised us and somehow was a miracle is that our bilateral relations have made giant and impressive strides. From former foes, our two countries have become friends and now comprehensive partners of each other. We have accomplished what President Ho Chi Minh 70 years ago stated in his letter to President Harry Truman, expressing the desire for full cooperation between Vietnam and the United States. And beyond that, Vietnam-U.S. cooperation has become a positive and indispensable factor to peace, stability, and development cooperation in the Asia-Pacific region. Suffice it to say that, although we used to miss many opportunities in history, we have been successful to build a new relationship based on common interests and trust building. Second, as we reflect upon the past 20 years of our bilateral relations, what makes us feel so strongly and wish to share with you is the most fundamental reasons to help us achieve such positive accomplishments. And those are the broadened interests shared by our two countries. Those are not only bilateral interests in economics, trade, education and training, science and technology, culture, and addressing war legacy issues. Those are also regional and global interests, such as maintaining peace, security, stability, and development cooperation in the Asia-Pacific on the basis of international law, climate change and disaster response, energy security, among others. In a dynamic and fast-changing world today, we need to value and foster such common interests. And I'm sure that these interests shared by our two countries will continue to broaden, creating new favorable conditions for our bilateral ties to advance further forward. Our two countries have truly made efforts together to develop the bilateral relations in the spirit of putting behind the past, overcoming differences, maximizing commonalities, and looking to the future, and with a sincere, candid, and constructive attitude. This is what has made our relationship so different and unique against other bilateral relations. And many people have commented that Vietnam-US relations represent an example for the effort to overcome the past to look to the future. On this occasion, on behalf of the Vietnamese leaders and people, I would like to thank the U.S. leaders, government officials, businesses, intellectuals, scientists, religious organizations, social organizations, and the Vietnamese community in the United States for supporting the decision on normalization of relations and establishment of diplomatic ties between Vietnam and the United States. And thank you for your ongoing tireless efforts to make our friendship and cooperation thrive. The growing relationship between Vietnam and the United States in the past 20 years, in the interests of both peoples and those of the region and the world, has proven the right vision and the values of such honorable endeavors. We believe that we owe the significant progress in Vietnam-US relations to the fact that our bilateral ties today are solidly grounded in the respect for the fundamental principles of international law and the UN Charter. Among these, the most important is respect for each other's independence, sovereignty, territorial integrity, non-interference in each other's internal affairs, equality, and mutual benefit. Based on such fundamental principles and deriving from the reality of bilateral ties, Vietnam and the United States have agreed upon a very important principle underscored in the joint statement between the two presidents in July 2013, namely both sides are committed to respecting each other's political regime. And the fact that two sides have fully complied with these principles has enabled Vietnam-US relations to grow fast in the right direction, build trust, and move towards new heights. Ladies and gentlemen, we have made long strides in the past 20 years of normalization, and today we have enormous opportunities to deepen, broaden, and add more substance to our comprehensive partnership. I firmly believe that in the spirit of constructive and mutually beneficial cooperation, mutual respect and mutual understanding, and on the solid footing of the bilateral ties that we have built and fostered over the past 20 years, Vietnam-US relations will achieve stronger and deeper progress in the interest of the two peoples for peace, stability, and prosperity in the Asia-Pacific and the world. And I would like to thank Mr. Vice President and you all for your valuable contributions to Vietnam-US relations in the past years. And I look forward to receiving your continued support and contribution to our bilateral cooperation in the years to come. In that spirit, may I propose a toast to the far-reaching and sustainable development of the Vietnam-US Comprehensive Partnership, to the good health of Mr. Vice President and you all present here. Thank you very much.